The Battle of Okinawa was one of the largest and bloodiest engagements of World War II, fought between April and June 1945. It was the last major battle of the Pacific Theater before the planned invasion of mainland Japan, and remains a stark example of the human cost of war. Okinawa, a small island in the Ryukyu chain, held immense strategic value for both the Allied and Japanese forces. For the Allies, capturing Okinawa would provide airfields and naval bases within striking distance of Japan's home islands, making it a critical step toward ending the war. For the Japanese, the island was a defensive stronghold, a final line meant to delay or prevent the invasion of the home islands. The forces involved were enormous. Over 180,000 U.S. Army and Marine Corps troops took part in the invasion, facing approximately 100,000 Japanese defenders. The battle also engulfed tens of thousands of civilians, many of whom were killed or displaced during the conflict. The high casualty rates and destruction on the island reflected the intensity and desperation of the fighting on both sides. Okinawa's geography made it a formidable battlefield. The island features steep ridges, dense vegetation, and a network of caves and tunnels, all of which were used by Japanese defenders to establish strong defensive positions. Rather than attempting to meet the enemy at the beaches, as had often been done in earlier Pacific battles, the Japanese implemented a strategy of attrition. They fortified inland positions, forcing the invading forces to fight through a maze of well-prepared defensive networks. Japanese soldiers were trained to fight to the last man, and their strategy relied on inflicting maximum casualties on the Allied forces while preserving as many of their own defensive positions as possible. This approach meant that even areas that seemed lightly defended at first could conceal deadly ambushes, traps, and hidden artillery positions. The preparations for the invasion were extensive. Following the successful campaigns in the Philippines and Iwo Jima, the United States military prepared for what would become one of the most complex amphibious assaults of the war. Naval bombardments and airstrikes preceded the landing, softening Japanese defenses along the coastlines. On April 1, 1945, Allied forces landed on Okinawa's beaches in a carefully coordinated assault. The initial landing encountered limited resistance, giving American commanders the impression that the Japanese might not defend the island as fiercely as anticipated. However, this perception quickly changed as troops advanced inland. The Japanese had deliberately concentrated their forces in fortified positions away from the beaches, drawing the Americans into a prolonged and brutal struggle over terrain that heavily favored the defenders. Once inland, American forces faced relentless attacks from Japanese troops entrenched in hills, caves, and fortified positions. Mortars, artillery, machine guns, and sniper fire inflicted heavy casualties. Progress was slow, measured in yards rather than miles. Every advance required careful planning and extensive coordination between infantry, artillery, tanks, and air support. The Americans employed flamethrowers and demolition teams to clear caves and bunkers, but even these measures could not prevent significant losses. The Japanese defenders demonstrated remarkable ingenuity, using the island's natural terrain and constructed defenses to channel American troops into kill zones and ambushes. The WWII line, located in the southern part of Okinawa, represented the core of Japanese defensive efforts. This heavily fortified line consisted of interconnected bunkers, tunnels, and artillery positions designed to slow or halt the American advance. Attacking it proved exceptionally difficult. For weeks, American troops engaged in a grinding campaign to dismantle these defenses. Artillery barrages and infantry assaults gradually overcame Japanese positions, but at a very high cost. The fighting along the WWII line exemplified the attritional nature of the battle, with progress measured in small gains and accompanied by heavy casualties on both sides. Japanese forces, following their doctrine of fighting to the last man, resisted fiercely, demonstrating their determination to protect the homeland and inflict maximum damage on the invaders. In addition to ground defenses, the Japanese employed kamikaze attacks to target Allied ships and disrupt supply lines. These suicide missions involved pilots deliberately crashing aircraft loaded with explosives into naval vessels, causing significant damage and sinking numerous ships. Kamikaze attacks underscored the desperation of the Japanese military and their willingness to sacrifice lives to achieve tactical and psychological advantages. American naval forces suffered considerable losses, but superior numbers and effective countermeasures eventually reduced the impact of these attacks. The combination of fortified positions and kamikaze attacks made Okinawa one of the most complex and deadly campaigns of the Pacific War. Okinawan civilians bore an enormous share of the battle's toll. Many were forced into combat support roles or conscripted to aid Japanese forces. Others sought refuge in caves, often coming under fire from both sides. Japanese military authorities sometimes encouraged civilians to resist the Allies, occasionally using coercion or threats. Tens of thousands of civilians were killed, either from crossfire, artillery, starvation, or forced mass suicides. Entire villages were destroyed. The sheer scale of civilian casualties added a tragic dimension to the battle, highlighting the consequences of total war for non-combatants. Contemporary accounts describe families fleeing through hills and caves, often facing starvation, disease, and constant danger from ongoing combat. American commanders faced immense challenges during the battle. While they possessed overwhelming firepower and numerical superiority, Okinawa's terrain limited their effectiveness. Steep ridges, dense forests, and fortified positions slowed mechanized units and reduced the impact of artillery and aerial bombardment. Coordinating multiple branches of the military in such conditions required careful planning and constant adaptation. The battle demanded relentless persistence and ingenuity, as well as the ability to minimize casualties while advancing toward strategic objectives. Despite these efforts, U.S. forces suffered more than 12,000 killed and over 36,000 wounded. The high casualty rate reflected the determination of the Japanese defenders and the brutal nature of the combat. By late May, the momentum of the battle shifted. American forces gradually broke through the Shuri line, forcing Japanese troops further south. The defenders continued to resist from fortified caves and hidden positions, but their ability to repel attacks was diminishing. American troops captured key positions and secured airfields that would prove essential for the planned invasion of mainland Japan. Despite ongoing kamikaze attacks and sporadic counterattacks, the Japanese forces were increasingly unable to prevent the American advance. The relentless application of firepower, coordination of multiple military branches, and numerical superiority allowed the U.S. forces to achieve strategic objectives, albeit at a staggering human cost. Organized Japanese resistance effectively ended on June 21, 1945. Okinawa lay in ruins. Estimates say over 100,000 Japanese soldiers were killed, while civilian casualties added another 150,000 deaths, adding to the catastrophic total. The capture of Okinawa provided the Americans with a staging ground for operations against Japan, including airfields for bombers and facilities for naval vessels. The immense human cost, however, profoundly influenced subsequent military and political decisions. Military planners estimated that an invasion of the Japanese home islands could result in even greater casualties on both sides, contributing to the eventual decision to use atomic weapons. The Battle of Okinawa stands as a stark illustration of the brutality and complexity of modern warfare. It tested strategy, endurance, and human resilience. Soldiers on both sides endured harsh conditions, constant danger, and intense combat. Civilians were caught in the middle, often paying the heaviest price. The battle demonstrated the devastating consequences of attritional warfare, where territorial gains are achieved only through relentless and costly fighting. The combination of well-prepared defensive positions, kamikaze attacks, and the determination of Japanese forces made Okinawa a uniquely challenging and deadly campaign in the Pacific War. The human dimension of the battle cannot be overstated. Eyewitness accounts describe the suffering of soldiers and civilians alike. Families were torn apart, villages destroyed, and the natural landscape of the island transformed into a battlefield strewn with wreckage and debris. Survivors recounted the psychological and physical toll of the fighting, emphasizing the long-term effects of combat, trauma, and loss. The experience of Okinawa highlighted the ethical and humanitarian challenges inherent in warfare, particularly in situations where civilian populations are directly affected. Okinawa's strategic importance extended beyond its immediate tactical value. The island became a critical base for launching airstrikes against the Japanese mainland and for supporting naval operations in the Pacific. Securing Okinawa allowed Allied forces to project power closer to Japan, facilitating bombing campaigns and logistical support in the months leading up to the end of the war. The ability to control the island's ports, airfields, and infrastructure played a vital role in the broader strategy of defeating Japan. Despite the ultimate American victory, the Battle of Okinawa left a legacy of destruction, loss, and reflection. The high casualties on all sides, combined with the suffering of civilians, underscored the human cost of war and the challenges of military planning in complex, heavily defended terrain. The battle also demonstrated the importance of intelligence, logistics, and coordination in modern military operations, as well as the limitations imposed by geography and the resilience of determined defenders. In conclusion, the Battle of Okinawa was a defining moment in the Pacific War, combining strategic significance with unprecedented levels of violence and destruction. The conflict demonstrated the extremes of human endurance, the complexities of military operations in difficult terrain, and the tragic consequences for both combatants and civilians. It marked the final step in the Allied push toward Japan, setting the stage for the closing chapters of World War II. The lessons of Okinawa continue to resonate in military studies, history, and discussions of the ethical and human dimensions of war. The courage, suffering, and sacrifices of those involved in the battle, both military and civilian, remain a testament to the harsh realities of conflict and the enduring impact of one of World War II's most harrowing campaigns.